afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to Albany City Council work session this evening, Monday, April 8th, 2024 at 4 p.m. Can we call the meeting to order? And can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Your Honor. Mayor Alex Johnson II.
Here.
Councilors Newton,
Present.
Novak,
Here.
Montague,
Here.
Kopczynski,
Here.
McGee,
Present.
and Smith.
Here.
All councilors present, Your Honor.
Well, thank you all for joining us this evening. We're going to start tonight's agenda off with the Airport Historic Hangar Museum update. Engineer Kristen Preston has a verbal presentation.
Actually, we have a presentation, so I'm going to share my screen.
Right.
Okay. So I'm going to kick this off, and then we have a couple other speakers that I'm going to turn it over to. But this is an update on the Albany Historic Aviation Museum project. And so we came to you last year, I think about this time, with the idea of a working aviation museum for the city's hangar. And recently, I know Councilor Smith asked for an update, so this is good timing. So the city owns the 1929 historic hangar that's shown in this picture. So looks a little different today, but it's a very unique structure, and it's listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And we've been working with a group on the concept of an aviation museum to be housed in the city's hangar. And so some interesting things have developed. So I'm just going to give a little bit of background and then turn it over to our partners here. Next slide. All right, there we go. One of the first things that we've worked on is a lease agreement for the use of the city's hangar for housing this aviation museum. And listed here are just, excuse me, a few of the key requirements of the agreement. And first and foremost, that it must be a working hangar. And this is to meet our requirements with the FAA for funding that we receive from them. So it can't just be a static, can't have just static displays or memorabilia. It must be, people must be working on planes for eventually flying or storage of functional aircraft. So that's why we're calling it a working museum. Another requirement is that this facility should be open to the public. There's lots of people who are interested in this hangar, as well as interested in aviation history. So we want to open for tours and displays and activities related to aviation history in the hangar. And another key requirement of our agreement is for marketing, outreach, and fundraising goals and plans for the museum, and to share those with the city. And develop a historic preservation plan for the building itself. As owners of this historic hangar, the city has obligations for maintaining the historic structure, and the city doesn't have funds or ability to invest in restoration or preservation work. So that is what we see as the benefit of having a nonprofit housed in the hangars who can do fundraising for such efforts. So, and then also we'll have legal and insurance and other requirements that are in the lease agreement. And all of that would be in lieu of rent. Because, as I mentioned, the city cannot afford to restore and preserve the hangar. A traditional lease would not improve the building at all and actually detracts from the building. So we see that as an overall benefit to the city and the airport in the long run for this unique building to house an aviation museum. And so the biggest development since our last update is that the Albany Regional Museum has stepped up to be the nonprofit sponsor to sign this agreement. And so we have here Keith Losey, who's the executive director of the Albany Regional Museum, who's going to give their perspective. And we have some folks here from the Aviation Museum Steering Committee who are going to describe the vision for this space.
Okay. Thank you, Council, for having us out tonight. So as Kristen mentioned, I am Keith Losey. I'm the Executive Director at the Albany Regional Museum. I've been with the museum for 6 years. I met Debbie, who is kind of the head, the lead on the steering committee and really the driving force to make some of this happen about 2 years ago when she came to the museum, the Albany Regional Museum, to do research with another group of pilots from the 99s for a presentation. We kept in touch after that, and she was sharing her ideas as this hangar became available about doing a museum out there. So I began informally advising and sharing how the regional museum operates, what some of the best practices are, and how we market and bring in volunteers. And while doing some of that advising, it occurred to me that there was a big mutual benefit for the regional museum to kind of sponsor this project and help them get on their feet. Our mission is to preserve, exhibit, and encourage knowledge of the history and culture in the Albany, Oregon area. And we have 4 historic districts, with the airport district being one of those and often the most overlooked. So this, putting a museum out there really just hits kind of our goals and values and mission. And so we felt that it was a really good fit. So we started discussing putting together a fiscal sponsorship for the steering committee. So rather than them going out and having to go through all of the steps to put together their own 501c3, we would serve as the source of their tax-exempt status, and we would manage their financial accountability. So we authorize and oversee the committee while they work on the project. This allows the work group to build certain skills and focus on the core work, such as creating a preservation plan and creating the public programming, while we handle those back-end responsibilities like accounting, insurance, the state and federal filings that often cause the volunteer burnout for a new organization. This will also give them access to our policies and procedures and hopefully give them some of the best practices to avoid those early mistakes that a lot of museums have when it comes to collecting objects and things like that. There tends to be problems that occur later for a museum in those early days just because there's not the skill background for it. And then last, the fiscal sponsorship will give the new organization greater access to grants, as many grantors have a 3 to 5 year life expectancy, where the organization has to have been in operation for that time. Being a fiscal sponsor, we have a 44-year history of having very successful granting, so that'll give them access to those funds sooner. The other benefits is that the staff, I've been in the museums field for over a decade. One of my staff members is close to that. She has a master's degree in cultural resources. So it'll give them a chance to have a lot of those best practices and give a lot of very pertinent advice. And we also have a built-in audience for marketing and support. So we really think that this is a great fit. And my current board members, I have 3 board members who join the steering committee each time they meet for review of this. And then we are going over, kind of doing our due diligence on the contract between us and the city, and then also the contract that is going to be between us and the steering committee. And hopefully we'll get that finalized in the next 2 months before we get to the busy summer season.
So we have a few slides from Debbie and Mark, who have been leading this effort from the steering committee perspective. So they're gonna, if you guys want to come up and go through your presentation. And I can also, just tell me next slide. Okay.
My name's Mark Baxter. My job today is to just give a brief and very brief overview of Albany's aviation history. No talk about aviation history in Albany would be complete without starting with John Burkhart. He flew the first airplane that was built and flown in Oregon, right here in Albany, at about Queens and Jefferson. And that location was used for flying for a number of years until it was deemed too wet. And about then, Charles Langmack, some of you may know the name Langmack, a famous aviator here, he and his brother decided that the site where the current airport is was much better because it was higher and it had more gravel, and so it stayed drier. Around 1920, that's when they started flying from the current location. Charles Langmack started flying as a 12-year-old with his brother David. As a matter of fact, Charles Langmack was Oregon's first licensed pilot, got his pilot's license in 1921. In 1929, about the time the Albany Airport got started, he got his pilot's license from the Federal Aeronautique Internationale, way before the United States was giving out pilot's licenses, and his license was signed by Orville Wright. Charles Langmack was then instrumental in creating the Albany Airport where it currently sits. It was dedicated in 1929, and you can see the picture here is what it looked like back then. It's without a doubt Oregon's oldest continuously operating airport in its original location. It's really quite an amazing thing that the folks in Albany back in 1929 had the vision to dedicate a municipal airport. As you can see, that same year, they constructed a hangar, an 80 by 100 clear span hangar, and that's the hangar that we're currently talking about today. The picture that you see there is remarkable because where the hangar sits in the picture, that's where I-5 is now. The hangar had to be moved a little bit to make room for I-5, but you can tell there wasn't much there. And in 1929, it took incredible vision to actually create an airport with a building like that. There were no clear span hangars like this one in Oregon at the time. And the fact that it survives today is truly remarkable. As you might know, in 1998, the airport and the hangar, or about 60 acres of the airport and the hangar, were placed on the Register of Historic Places. We can go to the next slide. I should mention one thing about that last slide, though. Not only is the hangar going to be 100 years old pretty soon, but that last slide demonstrated something else that's truly remarkable, and that is that this picture was probably taken around 31 or 32, the time of the Great Depression. A lot of aviation suffered greatly during the Depression. The fact that the hangar survived till when aviation could get thriving again is really incredible, and that we still have it today. This picture was taken during what's called the period of historic significance between 1929 and 1947, and you can see that they survived the Depression, and Albany started to be a great place of aviation gathering at the time. This is when the Burlesons had the flying service there. Next slide. And we need to discuss Evelyn Burleson Waldron. She and her husband Howard had the flying service here, and she was a truly remarkable woman. She was only in Albany for a few years, but she described her time here as Shangri-La. While she was here, she taught over 250 students to fly. She was involved in the civilian pilot training program, which was a cooperative effort with Oregon State University. Later, she would make a historic flight from Vancouver, British Columbia to Tijuana, Mexico, nonstop in a small plane, something that hadn't been done before or since. Next slide. So this is what the hangar looks like today. You can see that it looks a little different than it did back in the day, but the structure itself is unchanged, essentially unchanged from when it was built almost 100 years ago. The construction feature is unique, and we think it's the only building of its type left in Oregon today. You can also see the beacon tower there next to it. That's the original tower that had the navigation beacon from the 20s. Back then, airplanes didn't have radios, and so they navigated by flying from beacon to beacon. And so it really is historic. And so Debbie's going to talk a little bit about where we hope to go with our museum project.
I'm Debbie Orger. The Aviation Steering Committee consists of 9 members. 2 members are administrators. Kristen Preston is our liaison between the city and the museum, and Keith Losey is the director of the museum. The other 7 members come from our community: retired firemen, 2 retired teachers, a high school student, 2 very active members of our community. So that we come from a variety of backgrounds. There are 3 pilots, though, on the committee. They have been given the task to develop the mission statement and the vision statement, and we've now are on developing the goals. So there's 3 tasks. We've met since December, 1 hour a month, and it's amazing of what we've accomplished thus far.
Oh, next slide.
Yeah. The mission statement: a working museum dedicated to preserving and sharing Albany's unique place in aviation history. This mission statement describes who we are, what our purpose is, and gives us a focus for what the work that we need to do in the future. Our second task is the vision statement: an interactive and dynamic museum that educates, preserves, and honors Albany's aviation history, inspiring future generations to take flight. This is a concise statement that is aspirational and inspirational. What will our museum look like in the future? The third task are our goals. This is developing short and long-term goals, defining our organization, establishing our ongoing steering committee, outreach, marketing, and community engagement, and hangar restoration and preservation.
So one of the things about having a museum in the hangar is that, like Kristen said, it needs to be a working museum. And what you see here is a picture of Evelyn's Miss Liberty airplane that she flew from Canada to Mexico in 1941. The lower picture, you can see the framework of the airplane that we're going to restore and use as kind of the centerpiece to tell her story. And so people will be able to come to the museum and watch and learn about how we restore old aircraft, historic aircraft.
So we plan events, outreach, and education. Last spring, we had an open house, and we had almost 300 people attend that open house. Throughout the year, we've been giving small group tours and talking with people. We're possibly planning for an open house during Art and Air Festival. Outreach, right at the moment, I have 28 students who are interested in becoming part of a model airplane club. So setting a course, next steps. Number 1, we need to complete our goal setting, our short and long-term goals. We need to finalize the hangar lease agreement with the city. 3, we need to establish an ongoing steering committee, because when we gathered these people together for a steering committee, we just asked that they work on the mission and vision statement and then on to the goals, but hopefully we'll be able to keep together as a team. 4 is that we need to finalize the fiscal sponsorship with the Albany Regional Museum. The last slide.
This is, I mentioned earlier about the aircraft that John Burkhart flew. This is a picture of his airplane. It's pretty incredible to think that the first airplane built and flown in Oregon was flown right here in Albany. John Burkhart was able to actually visit the Wright brothers in North Carolina at Kitty Hawk when they were flying their first airplane.
He was also a student at Cornell University and studied aerodynamics. One thing that I would like to leave a thought with you is this idea of time, that tomorrow, this picture was taken on April 9th, 1910, 114 years ago. So our aviation history is very much, goes back a long ways. So do you have any questions that you would like to ask at this time?
Council? Councilor Montague?
So you guys mentioned the beacon. I didn't even notice that when I was at the event. Is that part of the project, or is that like separate?
Well, the beacon itself on top of the tower is a modern beacon.
Oh, okay.
And it rotates at night, and it serves the same purpose it's been serving for a long time.
Okay.
The original beacon that was there was a much brighter beacon. And the original beacon was actually part of, that's how people navigated up and down the West Coast, is they flew from beacon to beacon.
But we don't have that beacon.
No, but the tower is original
Oh,
from
okay.
the 20s, yes.
Cool.
And another part of that is that's a part of the airmail service. So when they were bringing the mail up the valley from San Francisco to Seattle, those lights were, that beacon was a part of that.
Cool.
It's one of the few surviving original towers.
Okay. Neat. Thank
Any
you.
other councilor have anything? Oh, Councilor Novak was first.
Oops, turned myself off. Not a question, just a comment. I think it's really neat. I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, and I appreciate the update.
Thank you.
Here, here.
Councilor Smith?
Since I was the one who asked for the update, I'll take the most time, but I'll keep it short. Thank you. Very complete report. I am so excited that the museum is partnering with you. That's a natural arrangement that maybe some people wouldn't think of. And I appreciate Keith, whoever stepped forward at first and suggested that, because that's just a natural combination, and I see great things in the future. I have not personally met the Wright brothers, but I can tell you that as a young reporter, fresh out of journalism school, one of my early assignments was to interview Charles Langmack for a series of stories about his career as a pilot. And so that's my brush with greatness from the past. Thank you for remembering him.
Thank you. Councilor Kopczynski? Councilor Newton? Councilor McGee?
I had to unmute myself, but I don't have
Okay.
anything.
Councilor McGee?
I don't have anything either.
Thank you. I'm actually pretty excited about this in that it's a resource that's been languishing and not being utilized. I've been here 30 years, and this is the first time I've seen a project come forward that would actually put that building into practice and as a resource for the city of Albany. So will there be charging fees for this, or is there any way we can monetize any of this?
That part remains to be figured out.
Because it'd be nice to have people get off the freeway and pay a small donation to actually participate in the historic value of our wonderful resource.
Well, one of the benefits of having the hangar get moved from its original location is people driving up and down I-5 are going to see we'll have a big sign, that says Aviation Museum or whatever it's going to be called, and people will be able to see it from the freeway.
Has there been any thought on partnering with what's going on with the Aviation Museum up north and kind of sharing information? So it'd be kind of a tour like the carousels, have this carousel map? That'd be really something we can benefit
Yep,
from.
we've talked about that.
Yes, because there are 8 aviation museums in Oregon. And actually, we're partnering with the museum in Cottage Grove, the Oregon Aviation Historical Museum, with the refurbishing of Miss Liberty.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you for your presentation this evening. Greatly
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Please forgive me for this. I need to take a bio break, so we're going to adjourn for a few minutes. Thank you. 5 minutes. On behalf of Civeris, so I'm going to have the last person, Wanda Sheeler, speak first. So Wanda, you please join us? Yes. You have 3 minutes, ma'am.
Wanda Sheeler. Address is 125 Expo Parkway, Northeast, Albany, Oregon, 97322. I'm here in regards to the crosswalk at Expo Parkway and Knox Butte Road. I feel like it should be a priority, not only to get across from my park to the fairgrounds, but we've been asking for this ever since we built it in 1997. It's never got any further than that, but one of the reasons people get to that light at Timber Street and they feel like it's a freeway from there to the freeway, and they just go so fast, and that's why we have those wrecks. And I think if we had something there to just slow people down a little bit, make them think before they get that far, would help. And also, on the south side, or the north side of Knox Butte Road, there's no sidewalks or curbs. So anybody that wants to go either east or west, when they get out to the road, they have to go across the road, and it's like taking your life in your hands to get across because people are going so fast. And people set their garbages out on the side, so you almost have to walk in the road to get like to Dairy Mart or go to town or whatever. And that's kind of why I felt like it should be a priority. That one should be, and it doesn't sound like it is, according to.
Good, thank you. What I'll do is we can recommend that during business from the council, we'll have we can make recommendations to council, the staff to take a look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's also going to be later in the agenda, Wanda. Next on tonight's agenda is Matt Bennett. So thank you for your note that you sent out to us. We have it and we're reading it and taking under advisement. So you have 3 minutes to touch the salient points. We appreciate it.
3 minutes?
Yes, 3 minutes.
I understood from the city manager we'd have 10.
That's what I thought.
Peter?
That's correct, but then you sent the whole memo out, which is covering everything. And I think the mayor's sense is that we've got that, all the councilors have it. So if there's something in addition to the memo, I'd
Yes.
recommend you work that out.
Well, so for those of you that don't know her, this is Kate Portia, the former head of the economic development and urban renewal for the city of Albany. So Kate, if there's anything that you're wanting to do in 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to hit the highlights. Again, we understood there'd be 10 minutes, so a little disappointing to find out there's only 3. We did send the memo, which had quite a bit of information in it. But I think what I want to share with you, having lived here, raised my kids here, rehabilitated 3 historic homes myself, is that this project is an authentic Albany economic development project. It hits on the highlights and priorities that the community and council has raised in terms of rehabilitating historic buildings. This project hits on many cylinders that you guys have prioritized. It rehabilitates and preserves a blighted, significant, and highly visible historic building. It'll strengthen Albany's historic downtown. It creates a welcoming gateway into your downtown, and it drives economic development through tourism and the support of local firms. Also, it enhances Albany's economic vitality through the support and expansion of local businesses. I think also I want to mention this is not simply the relocation of a business. It's all those things I've mentioned, plus then the infill of the existing Sybaris restaurant space with what we hope would be a family restaurant that we think would complement the carousel very well. So you're kind of getting a 2-for-1 out of this project. I think it's important too, I know you guys have seen and approved lots of different types of economic development and urban renewal projects. This project has no tax abatements of any kind. So once the rehabilitation is complete, the city and the taxing districts would see and receive the full benefit of those increased property taxes. And I guess too, you'll hear from some of these folks, but I'd like to call to your attention some of the letters we received that were in the packet from the Albany Chamber, the Visitors Association, Downtown Association, and others. I think in closing, I'd like to say now is the time to support this project. The project's at a critical juncture and needs your support in order to achieve completion. The project is a reliable investment in the future of downtown Albany. As you guys know, Sybaris is locally owned and well-established, and they are an Albany-grown company that has long drawn tourism and businesses and spending to our community. We're committed to helping a new successful family restaurant open in the old space, and the renovation of this Oregon Electric Railway station, like I said, is an authentic Albany economic development project. So
Thank you very much.
we appreciate your support, and we'd like to hear too any questions you might
No,
have.
this is not the time for that. It'll be during business from the council. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on tonight's agenda is Bob Moore III.
Getting there.
I started your 3 minutes 2 minutes ago.
That's okay, I'm not gonna take long.
So I want to share with you guys something. Bob Moore and I graduated from the same high school 9 years apart in Southern California. So it's a blessing to meet him and be a friend with him here in Albany, and he's a good guy, so.
Thank you. And it's high school was 1,000 miles from here.
So, sir, you have 3 minutes, please.
Oh, yeah. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to appear on behalf of Sybaris Bistro this afternoon. I believe that everyone here is very familiar with Sybaris, the Bennetts, and their philanthropic endeavors. Additionally, they are excellent stewards of Albany's historic past. This is why they're taking such great painstaking efforts to return the Oregon Electric Railway to its former glory. I would encourage the council to find a way to assist the Bennetts in their endeavor to improve the entryway into the historic downtown Albany.
Thank you. Next on tonight's, next to speak is Janet Steele, Executive Director of the President Steele of the Chamber.
Alex Johnson II. So Janet Steele, President, CEO of the Albany Area Chamber, and you do have my letter in the packet. So I guess I'm just gonna re-emphasize the importance that economic development has to the chamber, and we don't take spending those funds lightly. Marilyn has sat here, I'm sure, where I've made a comment or two. But we believe firmly that the Sybaris re-enhancement or redoing the Oregon Electric Railway would enhance our vitality. It's a magnet, it's a draw for tourists and visitors in our area, not only all of us that enjoy their fine food, but all the people that they bring in. Matt and Janelle have a wonderful Northwest cuisine that they offer. The menu changes monthly. They're just outstanding citizens, as the letters already say, and as you know, but we highly encourage you to give some economic development funds to one of our finest businesses in restoring one of our finest buildings in downtown Albany.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Janet. Next on tonight's agenda is utility rate adjustments, FY 24-25. Chris Bailey. Oh, she's here. Thank you. Thanks, Director.
Trying to share my screen while I walk. I'm not that talented. No, it's a miracle I didn't fall down. Okie dokie. Okay, Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. And I'll apologize up front. This is our long presentation we do every year regarding the 3 utility rates. So I have 42 slides, so settle in. So this is the annual Public Works utility rate presentation that reviews the funding for the 3 water utilities and forecasted rate changes for next fiscal year as well as the upcoming 5 years. The presentation is broken into 3 main sections. First, I'll give an overview of what the revenue pays for. Then we'll show how our revenue is or is not keeping pace with our targets. And then finally, we'll look at the rate projections for the next 5 years. So first, where does this money go? We've discussed this with the council several times, but as a refresher, updating utility rates is really the end result of council action and direction. The council establishes the level of service that you want to achieve in the utility, which might include goals and objectives in the strategic plan, policy described in the utility master plans, capital improvement projects, and other sources. Then staff does work and research to accomplish that level of service within the funding that's available. When the funding is not adequate to reach or maintain the desired level of service, we come back and discuss that with council and find a path forward. Today's recommendation on rates is our presentation to you of what we think we need to continue to accomplish the level of service that we want to achieve. In the water utilities, revenue goes to one of 3 categories of expenditures. Our first obligation is to pay for our debts. So first we allocate funds toward debt payments if there are any. Then we keep the existing systems working and functional. So the second thing we allocate our money for is operations and maintenance. And then any funds we have remaining are put into capital programs. It's important to remember that if we find ourselves without enough funding to meet our capital needs, then we have to figure out how to overcome that limitation, which might mean raising revenue or deferring capital maintenance. And with systems like drinking water and sanitary sewer, you can't defer capital investment for very long before you end up with creating significant risks to the public's health and safety. So the first category is debt repayment. We do try to accomplish our work without taking on additional debt, but sometimes the need is beyond our ability to pay as we go. So anytime we have a need in the utilities that we can't pay for, we find the least cost solution, which sometimes is breaking expensive projects into phases, which is what we've done with the Cox Creek Interceptor. Other times it means taking out loans or using bonds to debt fund the project. Currently, we have 3 sources of debt. In the sewer fund, we have 2 loans. First is one that was taken out to fund the reconstruction of the Albany-Millersburg Water Reclamation Facility and the construction of Talking Water Gardens. We did refinance this loan several years ago to get a better interest rate when that was possible. And the current annual payment for that loan is $4.64 million, and it will be paid off in 2032. Also in the sewer fund, we have another Clean Water State Revolving Fund loan that we recently took out to construct improvements to the Riverfront Interceptor, including a wet weather lift station. That project was completed in 2021. Our annual debt payment for that loan is $617,000, and it will be paid off in 2041. In the water fund, we have 1 loan that was taken out to construct the Albany-Millersburg Water Treatment Plant and several other facilities. The annual payment towards that debt is $1.92 million, and it will be paid off in 2034. We currently don't have any debt in the stormwater utility. Once our payments for debt are considered, our next obligation is to pay for operations and maintenance. O&M includes personnel, materials, capital maintenance, and regulatory requirements. Timely and sufficient investment in O&M often saves money in the long run by reducing the risk of system failures, emergency repairs, or regulatory noncompliance. O&M is a huge destination for much of our rate revenue, so I'm going to go into some details on our 3 water utilities and show you what we do with all that money. Starting off in the sanitary sewer, all of the wastewater generated by residential, industrial, and commercial customers in Albany and in Millersburg, for that matter, travel through a network of pipes and lift stations to one point, the water reclamation facility. This is a single point of treatment for all of our wastewater. And in addition to the WRF, we have thousands of pieces of sewer infrastructure, including over 200 miles of pipes and 11 sewer lift stations with associated force mains. In the last fiscal year, the WRF treated over 3 billion gallons of wastewater before returning clean water to the Willamette River. With the new biosolids composting system operational, we produced about 1,300 yards of Class A exceptional quality compost. We logged over 40,000 visitors at Talking Water Gardens. And I want to point out a somewhat lesser known aspect of our wastewater treatment program, which is a requirement to permit and manage discharge from certain industrial facilities. This is a requirement of our NPDES permit called the Industrial Pretreatment Program. It's a federal requirement. In Albany, our staff manages 24 industrial pretreatment discharge permits, including 9 that are in a federal class called categorical industrial users, which are very complicated and would represent our more complicated industries such as Huacheng. Each of those has to be permitted and inspected regularly by the industrial pretreatment staff. That program ensures that industrial discharge that might contaminate or harm our sewer infrastructure, our treatment processes, or the river are kept out of our system. In the collection system, last year we cleaned and inspected about 25 miles of pipe. Common problems with sanitary sewer pipes are grease accumulation and root penetration, so we have special maintenance activities that address those problem areas. We also respond to emergency requests and provide underground line locate services for the city's infrastructure. Some photos. So the photo on the left is a large pump repair project that was happening at the water reclamation facility. Up in the top middle, we are in the middle of our permit renewal for our NPDES permit. It requires us to take, I don't remember how many, 24 months worth of samples, I think, in the river and at the treatment plant for a wide variety of chemicals and toxic potential contaminants. So that's one of our sampling efforts in the river. We also had some repairs we had to do to a bridge at Talking Water Gardens because an unknown citizen decided that it needed a fresh coat of blue and purple paint. So we had to repair that. And then the bottom picture is our compost facility, which we're very proud of, and I think you all know quite a bit about that. In the water system, again, number of assets, we have 2 treatment plants, which is a little bit unusual. And of course, thousands of assets, including 7 reservoirs, which help the city meet water demands, including fire protection, and they help pressurize the system. Last fiscal year, we completed thousands of inspections along the canal, and we did preventative maintenance along the banks that totaled 38 miles worth of preventive maintenance on our 18-mile canal, so a lot of going back and forth. And combined between the 2 water treatment plants, we made almost 3 billion gallons of water. Continuing with more water work, most impressively, we've completed inspections on 8,300 connections, service line connections to the water system for the presence of lead components. This is in response to a new federal rule called the Lead and Copper Rule that is requiring water utilities to be much more aggressive in identifying potential lead connections and replacing them at the expense of the water utility. This is not really a problem for us. We haven't found any. We did some work years ago. You might remember when this came up. We did replace the known connections we had at that time, but this goes even further. We have to look at individual private service connections and figure out if they may contain lead. So far, we're doing fine. A lot of the utilities on the East Coast have a huge problem with this. In Oregon, it wasn't such a problem because we sort of came along later, I think. But that's a huge effort, and we're well ahead of where we need to be for compliance with that rule, and a lot of kudos go out to our water distribution staff for getting that done. In addition to the sampling that's done at the water treatment plants to make sure our water is treated correctly, we also regularly take samples out in the distribution system. We do planned maintenance and emergency maintenance on service lines, meters, reservoirs, valves, et cetera. We had some main break response, although not very much last year. And we do routine and emergency leak detection, and of course we manage over 9,000 cross-connection devices, also known as backflow prevention devices. More photos. Our staff at the treatment plants does have to wear respirators sometimes for safety because of the chemicals they deal with. So it's just an example of them getting fit tested for respirators. We have multiple staff in Public Works that have respirator requirements. At the top there, we're doing some, that's an old picture, but still relevant. This is some of the 38 miles of canal bank maintenance they do in the canal during the summertime. On the top right, that's actually a close-up picture of the top of a membrane module. So each of those little bitty round circles is, a little straw, essentially, that the raw water goes through and is filtered at the new modern water treatment plant that uses membrane filtration. Then we have a brake repair, and then some of our staff at the bottom right doing a membrane replacement. It's a huge project. It's all hands on deck. Over in the stormwater system, let's see. Okay. The storm system includes all of the ditches, culverts, underground storm mains, manholes, water quality facilities, and outfall pipes in the city. Like the other two utilities, we have thousands of individual pieces of infrastructure, but we only began collecting revenue to maintain the system in 2017. Even though we have ditches, culverts, pipes that are at least 50 years old, not older. I want to point out the bottom statistic. We have almost 370 public stormwater quality facilities. These are the planted stormwater facilities you see along the road, as well as some other larger facilities that might be more regional in nature. And this is a requirement or a consequence of the MPDES permit that requires us to provide this sort of passive treatment of stormwater before it reaches the streams. This slide is a little bit more about those same systems. So 10 years ago, we had relatively a handful of these things. Now we have 367, maybe 368 public ones, and over 400 private facilities. The private facilities, we aren't directly responsible for maintaining, but the regulatory permit requires that we make sure that they are maintained. So we go through and inspect them. We have private maintenance agreements that we have to enforce. And if they aren't maintained properly, we have to ensure that they are maintained properly because the city is on the hook, even though it's a private facility. So last fiscal year, we continued our work to clean and inspect the entire pipe network. To date, we've gotten through a little over 93% of the system and inspected hundreds of catch basins and manholes. We also investigated 51 reports of illicit discharge. And illicit discharge is anything that's going down the storm system that's not precipitation. And trust me, it's literally anything. And street sweeping also gives us some cleaning of our stormwater runoff as we get some of the gunk that comes from vehicles and other things off the roads before they wash out. Some photos on the left there, we did an outfall inventory, and this a couple of our one staff and one temp, I think, at one of our large stormwater outfalls. That's a big pipe. That pipe will run fairly full of stormwater during a heavy storm. In the middle there is a catch basin. You can see the metal grate has been pulled off, but you can also see where the metal grate was because it's just packed full of dirt and mud. And we have to get that cleaned out. And then on the right, this is the I think this came from the diesel spill that we just had. So a diesel spill is definitely an illicit discharge. And we had staff out there, as you probably know, for hours trying to get that stuff absorbed into absorbent, trying to protect catch basins and keep it from entering the river. So that's a wrap up of just the overview of the work that we do in our operations system. So now I'm going to head into capital spending.
Before we move on, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Well, was the person caught that did the spill, that caused the spill?
They were identified and pulled over. My understanding is the Oregon State Police pulled them over, and we know who they are. And I don't know where that stands, but we, I think, are working through our insurance company to try to recover our cost.
That was
for
the question I
cleanup.
had.
Yeah.
Okay,
I don't know
thank
where
you.
that is exactly, but that's our plan.
All right, thank you.
Okay. We also use rate revenue to partially fund, or sometimes fully fund, capital projects in each of the utilities. So because of that, we set capital revenue targets for each of the utilities, and those are listed on the page here. So I'll point out this stormwater one is very small, and that was the way that the stormwater rate was originally set up. The only capital funding that was included was a dollar amount to pay for the stormwater portion of average annual street projects. That's still where we are. We are able to slowly build up some capital reserves in stormwater, and we expect that the capital improvement program will have a list of stormwater projects when it's updated this coming year. And so this capital target for stormwater might increase next year. We'll see how that goes. In sewer, one of the priorities for sewer capital funds is continuing the investment in the program to identify and repair failing sanitary sewer collection lines before they become emergencies. Prior to developing this method of funding, we had virtually no routine investment in the sewer collection system, and as a result, we had major pipe failures with sinkholes and all kinds of bad things affecting customer service. But for the past 12 or so years, we've been doing a good job of being proactive and identifying potentially failing pipes. And we've virtually eliminated the emergency repairs. The capital target also has to fund other major capital needs. So examples of that might be a lift station upgrade, repair, rehabilitation project, and large sewer interceptor projects like the Cox Creek project, as I mentioned about 100 times. While our emergency failures are pretty much under control, we have a very thin margin. And so to demonstrate this, I'll just talk about 2 or 3 years ago, we made the conscious decision not to fund capital pipe replacement projects in the sewer fund because we took all of our available capital money and put it to Cox Creek because at that point we felt that that was a larger priority. And to demonstrate the very fine balance of our investment in our sewer system, because we didn't replace some of those pipes that we needed to replace, they failed in that intervening fiscal year. And so we ended up with a handful of emergency repairs on some pipes that would have otherwise been replaced, but we took a calculated risk to try to get the Cox Creek interceptor project going. So we're playing this game always. It's not a game. We're making strategic decisions always about what is more important this year. And that was a very good example of we can't really go for 2 or 3 years without replacing these collection system pipes because they really will fail. And we've also been very fortunate in getting some outside funding for Cox Creek. So right now, both things are going forward for next year. So despite all of this investment, we have, how many miles? 30 miles of pipe with structural defects that make them a risk to fail within 10 years. So these would be the ones categorized as 4 or 5. The good news is the slice of the pie that is 5 is significantly smaller than it used to be. I'll show you on this slide. So this was back in In 2012 is when we decided to try to do this, and you can see our linear feet on the left of 4 or 5 rated pipe was close to 90,000 linear feet. And through constant investment, we've brought that down. Now you can see where it flattened off because we didn't do that construction for a couple of years, but we're still just miles better than literally miles better than we had been. In drinking water, we're also making progress with the capital funding we have. Let's see. We've targeted and replaced the worst pipes in the drinking water system, and so our water loss percentage is around 9%, which is remarkable. And started off about 20 years ago above 30% water loss, so really good job. And we're continuing to refine our asset management system for those water pipes. And we've also created a fund for replacement of the water treatment membranes. They're very expensive, and they're required to be replaced about every 10 to 12 years. So we're funding that out of this rate revenue as well. In stormwater, as I said, we don't really have a capital program. We probably will have one defined for next fiscal year. We did get the master plan complete, but we currently are still funding the stormwater portion of street projects as those happen. And we'll have more information on that as we go. The unfunded capital needs in stormwater are significant. So we've assessed, as I said a minute ago, over 93% of the system. We have 16 and a half miles of pipes that are 4 or 5. And because there's been no investment in the stormwater system, the worst pipe in stormwater is really, really bad. 11 times worse than the worst pipe in the sanitary sewer system. So these are large pipes, they're more expensive to replace, and that 16 miles of bad pipe calculates out to about $48 million of needed investment in the stormwater system right now that we don't have. So another pie chart for you. This is the stormwater system. Again, it's not terrible. We have a large section of pipes that are 1, which is new because those are mostly new subdivisions and things that have been installed. But the needs in the stormwater system are significant. So just sort of reiterating what I had said before, we have a huge need, $48 million that we know of right now, and exactly 0 dedicated funding. So we'll be back to talk about that next year. Any questions on the capital portion of our spending?
Council?
When you were talking about the membrane replacement in the future and that being expensive, do you anticipate, because it's a newer technology and it is pretty expensive, do you anticipate there'll be grants out there for those? Will you guys be looking out for that? Or?
Well, we always are looking out for that. The membranes are newer, but we're already on our second round of membranes, or maybe third. I think the first batch of membranes failed very early, and we ended up getting free membranes. But we did a full set of replacement membranes about 5 years ago or so. So we're on our second full set of membranes. Okay. And they just are expensive. They are, I would expect that they would kind of come down in price, but there's really only one primary manufacturer, so you're kind of over a barrel. Yeah.
Any other council have a comment or a question?
Okay, we're like halfway done. Okay. All right.
Director.
So the next section is how are we doing with this money? Are we on track to meet our needs? And I'll just tell you, this picture is our Vector truck pipe. So it's a big suction hose. That's a chunk of concrete it's pulling out of a storm manhole. Yeah, so cool. So every year we look at our 3 funds and we try to figure out if our rates are appropriate or we're going to be able to keep up. And that's why we're here tonight. So lots of things can affect our rate revenue target. Inflation, of course, affects both operating and capital costs, as we know. We also have regulatory compliance. We are in the middle of a huge regulatory issue right now and pursuing the renewal of our MPDS permit for the wastewater treatment plant, the WRF. That likely will come with requirements for additional investment in treatment technology at the plant that aren't even factored in here. Similarly, drinking water regulations, PFAS is the chemical of the day, and we just completed a whole bunch of mandatory sampling for PFAS. The EPA asks us to sample, and they're very expensive samples, like $1,200 a whack. And the good news is we don't really have PFAS. We don't have PFAS in our drinking water source. So we're in good shape. However, the EPA is likely to come out with a rule requiring us to do ongoing sampling forever for PFAS. So that's just another cost to add on top of everything else. And then, of course, we have capital projects, which, as you know, we have a ton of. So here's the big takeaway, which is that based on our current budget forecast for the next year, our recommendation is for the council to consider rate increases of 2% in sewer, 4% in water, and 6% in stormwater. And all of those include the sewer rate is a response to inflationary increases. In the past, you probably, and I'll get to this in a minute, remember that we also had to use some sewer rate revenue for debt payments that were supposed to be made by SDC revenue. However, I'll explain in a minute why we have good news in that we don't have to raise rates as much as we thought we would, because SDC revenue has been doing a little bit better than expected. The water rate increase is simply a response to inflation and trying to get to that capital target to address some of the needs in the water system. The stormwater increase is an inflationary increase, but it's also based on forecasts of increased needs to continue to meet increasing stormwater regulations again. And so primarily what we're looking at there is continuing to do what we're doing, but we are also going to have to add staff and equipment as we try to maintain our system appropriately. So what does that mean? So these tables are based on what the category formerly known as single family residential, which is now called single dwelling unit. And it shows by the utility what the difference would be. And we use 800 cubic feet or 8 units because that is the volume of water that the state uses. So when you compare ourselves across the state, that's the common volume of water. Typically in Albany, the average single family home uses less water, more on the order of 6 units per month. And of course, as the less water you use, the lower your water bill, but also the lower your sewer bill. So this will vary among single family households. This table has the combined monthly charge for all 3 units, or all 3 utilities, pardon me, including the rate increases. So when you weight out the percentage increases, it works out to about a 3.3% in total increase across the 3 utilities. And then this table adds in the city services fee. I will make my standard disclaimer that Public Works does not receive any money from the city services fee. None of the city services fee pays for any of the water utility work, but the council has asked for a table that shows the total charge that the average single household, single family, single dwelling unit household would experience. So this adds that in, and the current city services fee is $9 per month for the typical house, and then there's a smaller charge for a smaller impervious area. No, I take that back, that's stormwater. It's $9 a month. There's a low income program that's half. That's what I'm thinking about. And then this table is standard table. We pull some comparison jurisdictions and show where Albany is as compared to municipalities all around us. On this table, you'll see that we're 7th on the list of combined utility bills. Last year, we were 6th, so we're going in the right direction. This table does not reflect any increases that any of these other jurisdictions might have planned. It's just their rates that they're charging right now. I'll just say, and I'm sure you saw the article in Lebanon, everybody's struggling. So, and then finally, this is the last table. This shows non-single family dwelling unit customers, which are typical multifamily, commercial, and industrial. These are real customers that we've made anonymous, except for City Hall, and shows what they pay in Albany versus other jurisdictions. I don't remember who asked for this 100 years ago, but we started doing this table and we still do it. So the thing to note about this table is commercial and industrial accounts are really much more tailored. They're broken up into type of business and then oftentimes further into strength, for instance, strength of their sewer load or number of connections, et cetera. So a lot more variables to try to figure out how much any particular business might pay. So this is just a sample. Okay, we're in the home stretch. Last section is the rate forecast. So we maintain a 5-year rate forecast of all 3 utilities to try to make sure we're not surprised in the future with needed rate increases. Let's see, forecasting is a risky business. There's lots of variables. So the rate revenue that you actually get is sometimes not what you think you're going to get, especially in water. If you have a hot summer, you might get more, and if you have a wet summer, you might get a lot less. SDC revenues are completely dependent on development, and we do underestimate SDC revenue just to be conservative, but again, you just never know what's going to happen. Personnel and operational expenses, we typically forecast for 5% increases in those. That's very conservative, but in 2020 and 2021, that was not enough. So, it's really hard to forecast. That's the bottom line. Sorry?
Please go back. She has a question. Jackie, Councilor Montague has a question.
So on the SDC revenues, I noticed in the packet that you were estimating 139 home starts for sewer, but only 118 for water.
Okay, so we're backing into that number by looking at the dollar amount. So we're forecasting a dollar amount based on the last 5 years of SDC dollar amounts that we've received. And then we're translating what that dollar amount might be equivalent to in home starts, because it's kind of a common thing to think about. But SDCs, typically when we get a large influx of SDCs, it's from a significant industrial or commercial customer. It's just trying to get it into a unit for like context of what that dollar amount represents.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful.
So this is the 5 years of sewer revenue. You can see it's sort of gradually increasing. Where am I? Sorry, totally got lost. Okay, 5-year history of sewer rate revenue. We're trending slightly upward, which is sort of keeping pace with inflation. And you can't see it on this graph, but in fiscal year 18, we had a 6% sewer rate decrease. Some of you will remember from when we implemented stormwater rates. So it's not always a straight line up. This is SDC revenue, sort of getting to that question. It's all over the place. It depends on the rate and type of development that it's happening. It makes it hard to predict. We take an average and we just try to go with that and a little bit under that so that we can be conservative and not count on revenue that we actually don't receive. Okay, this is one of my favorite graphs. I'll go through this graph again. Hopefully it's familiar to all of you on the council, but what this graph is showing is a breakdown of payments for debt service in the sewer fund. So early in the presentation, I said that we have about $4.7 million debt payment, 4.8-ish million dollar debt payment to make next fiscal year. The top dotted line is the total debt payment that's due each year from the sewer fund, going out to fiscal year 27, 28. The next line down, 28, 29. The next line down represents how much of that debt payment that sewer rates are paying. And then the third line, the dashed line, is the portion that SDCs are supposed to pay. And the bottom line, which is the solid line, is the portion that SDCs are actually paying. So when the debt was taken out, a portion of it was assigned to growth. So the wastewater treatment plant was built to accommodate the growth today and for the next 30 years. So that portion that was oversized or built out to handle growth was supposed to be paid for by SDC revenue. But we have not collected SDC revenue for many reasons in an adequate enough amount to make its complete payment. So rates are paying SDC's portion of debt to some degree. For this year, it's about $400,000. Last year, it was about $500,000. So we're a little bit better off than we were. Moving forward, SDC revenue is not forecast to ever be received in enough quantity that can fully pay its share. And so you can see that the gap really widens as we get out into the out years. Some of that is based on conservative forecasting, but we don't have really any, it would be unwise to think that we will be able to get enough SDC revenue to fully pay its share of debt. So in other words, rates often have to be raised higher than they would need to be otherwise because we are not getting enough SDC revenue to pay for its share of debt. So that's what that boils down to. So ratepayers are paying for growth's share of debt. Yes.
Excuse me. Ill time.
That's okay.
Pardon me. I'm just wondering if I can get this sentence out. Is there any way we can take out less debt?
Well, the debt that we have is the debt that we have. So we can't really do much about what's on the books now. Debt is not our first choice. You know, we do try to pay for things within our means to pay them, and we look for grants. So one example would be the Cox Creek Interceptor. That's a project that's needed. The portion of the Cox Creek Interceptor, the last phase, is 100% eligible for SDC funding. It is 100% needed because of growth. So if we had enough SDC revenue, we could pay for that, but we don't. We just, for many reasons, we don't. So what we've done is broken that project up into phases, and we've gotten congressional funding and state funding, which is not debt. It's completely 100% grant, I guess you could call it, to help pay with that project. So we try not to take out debt. But if you have, the water reclamation facility was a $72 million project. We don't have $72 million. It had to be built. We didn't have enough money to pay for it. So you have to get debt. And the debt that we get, the state revolving fund debt is very low interest rates. So I think 1.2% or something like that. So it's really low, but sometimes it just has to be done.
Thank you for that. If I might ask a follow-up question, now that I can speak. I was a little disheartened but not surprised to see a sentence that I've read, I think, at least a few times in other reports, personnel costs are still the largest single driver impacting operating expenses. And then the government is pushing other stuff down on you with testing that they say you must do this, but they don't give you any money and you need to hire more people to do whatever. And then I read in the LOC report about how they have decided that they need to increase benefit packages for people and they can retire at 55 instead of 60. And I just think the whole thing seems somewhat unsustainable. I just am at a loss. I don't see how anyone will survive if we keep doing things the way we're doing. And maybe this is the only way it can be done. I'm just expressing a concern publicly that I think these systems and the way we do what we do, it might be the only way to do it, I don't know, but I don't think it's sustainable.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just say that funding and attracting and paying for people is, it's a known challenge. And in the public works world, there are a lot of discussions going on about affordability, utility affordability at the national and the state level. So it is a problem. We are aware that it's a problem. But it's a tough nut to crack because, you know, the PFAS requirement, for example, we want people to not ingest carcinogens with their drinking water. That's a good goal. So that's where that comes from at its base. Having to figure out if you have it and how much it would cost to treat it, you know, there's a cost associated with that. So.
May I ask another question, since that reminded me of something? You said the cost of the chemicals is skyrocketing, and I'm wondering what chemicals those are, and if there's a way to replace them with something else, like chlorine dioxide, which used to be used to sterilize and do all kinds of purification, and it's not toxic, like chlorine and some of the other things that we put in our water. So I'm just wondering if there are other alternatives that we could use that are less expensive.
There are alternatives for disinfection. We used to use chlorine gas at the wastewater treatment plant. That was a nightmare. Literally, we had a leak one time and, you know, we all had to run uphill. There are options that are not chemical-based. For instance, ultraviolet treatment is relatively new technology, and we are looking at that for one of the aspects of future treatment need at the wastewater, the water reclamation facility. But that also has a very high energy cost. So, you know, you're trading one cost for another, kind of. You know, we do our best to try to find our least cost option that still maintains compliance and doesn't have horrible side effects. So we're on the lookout for those things. There's all kinds of information that comes out about those. But as far as what the chemicals are, mostly it's sodium hypochlorite, which is liquid chlorine. It's basically like chlorine bleach in concentrated form that we use at both treatment plants. And then we have a number of other chemicals we use in smaller quantities for maintenance operations and different things. So it's just a lot. You know, I don't know why the prices are what they are, but yeah, they're going up. So is the price of electricity. So that's another great thing to look forward to.
Yeah, I guess part of my concern is because when you increase rates for inflation, that same inflation is hurting people who don't get an automatic cost of living increase. And there's a lot of folks like myself and people I represent who aren't getting a cost of living increase or any increase of any kind except on their bills. So, you know, I appreciate that you're doing your best. I'm just saying it's really getting hard out here.
Sure. Got it.
Thank you.
Okie doke. Let's see. I don't remember if I've talked about this slide or not, but so this is the current rate, proposed rate increase, and then in the future, our ability to forecast gets terrible as we look out in the future. So conservatively, we're looking at 4% in the out years. That, of course, will change every year. And this time last year, we thought we needed a 3%. We actually only need 2%. So that's one bit of good news. In the drinking water fund, Similarly, our rate revenue sort of slowly ticks up over the years. Water SDC revenue, again, it bounces around a little bit. We didn't have quite the giant jump that we did in sewer, but it comes in, as it comes in. And then here's the rate forecast for the next year, and then we are forecasting one more year of 4% and then maybe 5% in the out years. Again, that will be adjusted as we get closer.
So for the next 2 years,
Sorry.
Director, so I'm looking at 24 and 25 at 4%?
Mm-hmm. Yes. As of right now. And then finally, stormwater. This revenue chart goes up at a steeper angle because, again, we were building. Remember the 17% rate increases for stormwater? We've finished with those. We have met our revenue target that we hoped to meet with this year's rate increase that just went into effect. And so we're off of the 17% trend and forecasting lower. The 6% in the out years is really just a guess. As I said, this doesn't reflect the $48 million in needed repairs that we know we have in the stormwater system. Those aren't budgeted in here, so that likely will go up. And one more time, the recommendation that we have for sewer, water, and stormwater rates is 2%, 4%, and 6%. Keep in mind that all of these rates do go in at different times in the year. So those combined total bills that I showed earlier, they really only happen about this time next year. So the last one to go into effect goes into effect on March 1st, and that's stormwater. So the weighted average increase would be 3.3%. And I think with that, I'm finally done and can take whatever questions you have.
Go ahead, Councilor Montague.
I should have asked this one earlier, but when I was reading through the packet, I was curious, is there a trenchless technology for the stormwater infrastructure like we have for sewer? You guys were talking about how cool that was.
I'm gonna
Much
say
cheaper
yes.
it is? Okay.
I think probably the answer is yes.
Okay. I figured they're
but
both pipes, right?
Somebody in the
But
back might be yelling no, but I don't know.
I don't see anybody saying no,
Okay.
but a lot of people looking at me like, why are you asking that question?
I think we could do something similar that we would do on a sanitary sewer pipe with a stormwater pipe.
Okay.
We haven't had any perpetual life replacement projects for the stormwater system, so that's why I'm not, I don't know. We have done, sadly, not enough work for it to be at the top of my brain. But I'm gonna say I think it probably could.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Anyone else? Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a question. I just wanted to know more historically about why we haven't been charging for SDCs. It seems like, it's kind of everyone it seems like every city's having a budget crunch. And I want to know why we haven't been charging historically, and then do we have a plan moving forward for charging SDCs?
Councilor Newton, we do charge SDCs. We just don't charge the full amount of SDCs that we could charge. I think that's a true statement in both water and sewer and transportation and stormwater. The council, so the way those come to the council is we do have an engineering analysis that says based on the master plan and the costs associated with growth, the maximum system development charge per residential unit would be X dollars. The council can vote to approve X dollars or something less than X dollars, but not something more than X dollars. And the Albany councils have traditionally not fully charged system development charges.
Do you know, and sorry for my phrasing earlier, I just got my words mixed up, but do you know how far below we are from what we could be charging?
I don't know right off the top of my head, but I can get that and get it back to you.
That'd be fantastic.
The other thing to note, the exception kind of is stormwater. You just passed a stormwater SDC that went into effect this past January 1st. So I didn't even have a slide on stormwater SDC revenue because we've literally received a minuscule amount of stormwater SDC in the last 3 months. So maybe next year we'll have enough to talk about.
So I had a question, or a need of information. Could you please, as we move forward, think about or consider bringing back a report, the increase of people going on low-income assistance with the rising rates?
Sure.
Because that'd be a nice number to know, because the people I support that are my clients are older folks, and they are on fixed income. So I'd like to see what the impact would be going forward, some kind of projection as far as what do
Sure.
you think will happen?
Yeah, and I'll also, this is a good reminder for the public that hopefully you're watching, which is that we do have low-income assistance program. It did expand during the COVID years. The federal government provided some funding and we loosened the requirements so more people qualify for low-income assistance. So if you're struggling with your water bill, Community Services Consortium manages that program for us and would encourage anyone who might need it to reach out. It's a good program.
Can I ask a quick follow-up on that? Do you know if the plan will be contracting since a lot of COVID funding is ending?
It continues. So the COVID funding just sort of reimbursed the city for the expansion, but we changed what we have discovered is we charge 35 cents per customer on the water portion of your water bill to fund that program. And we have adequate funding to continue and expand that. If we don't, we'll end up coming back to the council and asking to raise that 35 cents to maybe 40 cents or something. But for now, we have plenty of funding to continue. I would suspect that not as many people are taking advantage of it as could. So if they did, then it would be, I think, a good problem to have.
I have a question to that. You
Councilman
said
Gee.
a lot of people are not taking advantage of it as many people that could. Is there a possibility that there are just not, the requirements are so rigid that they cannot or not in a position to take advantage of it because of their income or the restrictions that are based upon the specific program?
Yeah, I think that we addressed that. So it used to be that you had to be either senior or disabled and meet the income threshold. And we removed that. And so now you just have to meet the income threshold, and we lowered the income threshold. So, or raised the income threshold.
Right, I was
Whichever
like,
way
lowered
that
it.
makes it more
Right.
people.
Lower the
Okay.
income threshold, yeah.
Right, I was like, well, that didn't help if you lowered it, but raised it,
lowered it.
yes.
Yeah, and that information, we do try to get that out as often as we can. And I know if people are going to Community Services Consortium for other needs, such as power or other types of assistance, that they also always offer this for people that qualify.
I have another last question. Dr. McGee jogged my memory on something. I had a constituent reach out, I believe, last November, could have been October, and they couldn't afford their water bill or their electric bill. And I let them know about the Community Service Consortium, and they said, "Oh, well, actually, like they didn't have any more. They were full." So I'm curious if either you would be able to get the numbers and give them to us about, how much funding or how many people we would be able to still have on the low income plan if needed. Because just one of my constituents, and I didn't verify with Community Services Consortium, someone if you can, yeah, just to see if that truly is at max capacity or what the status is.
I will. I'll just plan to bring back a report on the low income program and how it works and how many people are in it and all the details, how much it costs. And hopefully I can address that. I don't know that we have a maximum number of people, but there are some timing questions because you do have to reapply, and I'll just have to refresh my memory as to how it works and bring a report back for you.
Thank you, directors. Thank you, Council. Councilor Kopczynski, do you have anything? Councilor Smith? Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate your presentation, and please follow up with us on that other information we asked for.
I definitely will.
Thank you. Next on tonight's agenda is Economic Development Overview. Sophie Adams, page 14 of your packet.
Okay, good evening. Gosh, that is a hard act to follow, but we'll do our best. So while she's getting set up, For folks joining us online and here from the public, I'm Sophie Adams, and
I am Jennifer Ware.
we're your economic development team. So this presentation is in response to a request from council for an overview of our department and our activities. I'm not going to try to capture everything that we do, but this should give you and the public watching a good idea of what the types of activities that we do here at the city. Again, like I said in my memo, no action requested. This is just for your information. All right, so starting at the beginning, what is economic development? There's a lot of definitions out there. Most of them talk about generating revenue, increasing productive capacity, transforming economies, et cetera, et cetera. Not bad things, not very inspiring either. This is the version that I like. I pulled it from the International Economic Development Council, and that is programs, policies, or activities that seek to improve the economic well-being and quality of life for a community. I like that. So why is this an important part of city government? Well, what we all want is a thriving community. Healthy, diverse, sustainable economy is the foundation of that vision. Cities are in a unique position to be useful in economic development because we necessarily touch, like you just heard, many of the components that can be barriers or opportunities like land use, long-range planning, infrastructure funding, and community visioning. I borrowed this graphic from another economic development association. Again, doesn't capture anything, but I kind of like the way it lays this out. It shows the relationship and role of economic development work in a community. So your economic development department in Albany has 2 full-time staff members dedicated to carrying out economic development activities on your behalf. We are currently housed under the Community Development Department, which is pretty common for a city, but really, we could be anywhere. Our work interacts with almost every other city department, probably all of them, and relies heavily on collaboration with the city manager's office and direction from you, the council. Our department is currently funded through a combination of transient lodging taxes and tax increment financing, our current program being CARA. These are the goals directly related to Albany's strategic plan goal of a healthy economy. You're all familiar with these. And for members of the public, our strategic plan and our first report are available online. But everything that we do on a day-to-day basis connects back to these goals and vision for the city. The foundation and driver of Albany's economy is what we call traded sector industries, a fancy way of saying businesses and industries that sell their goods and services outside of the area, in turn bringing money into the community. So these industries are critical because they stimulate our local economy and offset leakage caused by all of us just naturally spending some of our money not in Albany. These types of industries typically invest heavily in the community, which helps fund things like roads and other infrastructure, and they create jobs that sustain families here. So as the building block of our economy, our recruitment efforts are primarily focused on these types of businesses, but all businesses add to our well-being, all add to the quality of life and provide opportunities for jobs and services and play a role in making Albany a good place to live. So with these goals and priorities in mind, what does our day-to-day work look like? Much of our focus is on existing businesses. According to the SBA, that's Small Business Association, over the past 25 years, jobs created by small businesses account for 2 of every 3 jobs added to the economy. So that's pretty impactful. This business retention and expansion is a category of economic development work that describes what we do to support businesses to stay and thrive here. So our support comes in many different forms. Some are listed here. Again, impossible to list everything that comes up day to day. The state and the city's own regulations on land use and pathways to development can be daunting, especially for first-time business and property owners. So we often help field questions, get people pointed in the right direction, and walk with them step by step as they navigate permits, zoning, and other hurdles during project development. Over the years, we've had various funding programs available to property owners through urban renewal, and we manage and administer our enterprise zone benefits, but primarily direct funding to businesses isn't a role of local government. However, we work closely with local banks, credit unions, and other organizations like Dev Northwest, Community Lending Works, Business Oregon, and other state and federal entities to match businesses with needed funding for their success. We help connect businesses with properties. If they're looking and needing to expand, we want to keep them here in Albany, so we'd like to play that matchmaker role whenever possible. And as funding opportunities or new regulations, et cetera, come up, we do our best to share that information with the businesses that could be affected. Of course, COVID is a great example of how important this information sharing was, and really quickly. Just one note that without a registry of some kind, it's difficult to distribute this information efficiently and equitably. So we rely on a lot of our partners to help us get the word out to their members and at their meetings and that sort of thing. Recruitment activities are focused on bringing new businesses to Albany that use vacant or underutilized land, and they invest in our community and create jobs. So this happens by working directly with property and business owners that are connected with us, or reach out directly, and that does happen. People call and say they want to do business here and they're looking in Albany. We also work closely with our partners at Business Oregon, which is our state's economic development agency, to respond to incoming requests through them. Often these are from out of state or even international companies that are looking at coming to Oregon or our area, so we respond to those requests. 99% of the time, that includes coordination with our local utilities like power and gas providers, as well as the city or in Public Works Department, to make sure that the site that might fit them can meet the business's needs, or figure out what a pathway looks like to upgrade the infrastructure there so that it could work. On the subject of infrastructure, we're also always, as Director Bailey mentioned, looking for funding and planning opportunities that can assist in making our vacant industrial and commercial land shovel-ready. Recruitment involves long-term planning work to make sure that we have sites that are attractive to businesses and ready to go. But also on the flip side, it's a really fast-paced part of the job too when these come up. Often requests come in with very tight turnaround. And so we're kind of working around the clock to get information and make sure that Albany's in the running when these companies are deciding on a location. Placemaking is a little bit of a nebulous term, but I think it's an important piece of this economic development puzzle. Generally, it's about utilizing a community's assets, inspiration, and potential to promote well-being and community, which in turn attracts new talent and industry as well. So we have to look no further than our own downtown Albany for a good example of this type of activity. We have incredible natural and historic resources in downtown. And when it was clear that we were underutilizing these resources, the community and the city took action by creating CARA, which had a funding source, which led to the revitalization of these natural and historic resources. Beyond CARA, we have a high-performing Main Street organization in the Albany Downtown Association, which provides so many great services to downtown Albany. I'm happy to be a liaison to their board and serve on their Economic Vitality Committee as well. And as you know, our economic development budget also funds some of their work through our existing contract. Your Economic Development Department also helps fund the Albany Visitors Association, another great partner in tourism and promoting Albany, the historic Monteith House, our historic trolley, city events like Northwest Art and Air Festival, the historic airport, which you also heard about tonight, and city staff, which all contribute to lifting up Albany's tourist attractions while also making Albany a great place to live and do business. We staff the Tourism Advisory Committee, which advises on tourism-related activities and awards your collaborative tourism promotion grant funds. And as a reminder, those help fund new events in Albany. Much of this work is possible because of the transient lodging tax paid by folks who spend the night in our hotels. And we work with our finance department to manage that process and make updates when necessary, including one upcoming one regarding short-term rentals and the collection of TLT from them, which I'll touch on later. One of our goals in our strategic plan is strengthen the area's role as a leading regional economic center through local and regional coordination and collaboration on economic development planning and projects. So this is just a highlight, again, of some organizations and groups in which we're members, liaisons, regular collaborators. I know this doesn't encompass everyone. I don't mean to leave anyone out. There's a lot. This is, again, just a highlight. Includes the Economic Development Association, Council of Governments, which some of you are probably involved in, Lynn Economic Development Group, Chamber of Commerce, etc. Sometimes this collaboration is on special projects. You might remember the Meet the Lenders event or a business resource fair. Those things happened in the past, and we'd like to do more things like that in the future. Really, this collaboration is ongoing, and it's a critical part of information sharing and keeping our web of business support strong so that no one falls through the cracks. Just in the last couple weeks, I've had feedback from our state's regional development officer. And she was just sharing with us that we've become a great example for pulling together supportive partners during the recruitment process, and that's something that I'd like to improve on as well in the future. So like anything, there's a lot of behind the scenes work that rarely sees the light of day, which is fine, but I just wanted to highlight a couple things. Since we're doing a general overview, we spend time researching programs and putting together information for you on new things like TIF districts, the feasibility of those, and potentially, we've been talking about East and South Albany, the multi-unit property tax exemption program we talked about at your last meeting. And then once programs are in place, they take time and funds to administer. So especially as regulations and reporting metrics often change. For example, in the last Oregon legislature long session, there were some changes made to the enterprise zone program. That's something that I've been working on dealing with my partner, John Pascone, over at Ledge. So things like that always changing and evolving, and we do our best to keep up with it, do it well, and get the information out to the community. Our previous CARA grant and loan contracts require ongoing, management, as well as our contracts with outside agencies that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. You might recognize some of your faces in this picture. There's been a lot of successes. I'm not even going to try to list them all. TIF, CARA in downtown Albany is a shining example of what good planning work and funding sources can accomplish to preserve and renovate historic buildings, support businesses. Our carousel was a benefactor, and what an amazing example that is. Councilor Komsinski might agree. We've had long-term contracts put in place recently with organizations like the Downtown Association and the Visitors Association, which I'm really pleased about and glad that those partnerships can continue into the future. That's just a rendering there of CoreQuest, which you might remember was a strategic traded sector recruitment completed over the last couple years. They received enterprise zone benefits as well as water and sewer economic development funds. That was a huge project, over $9 million of investment with over 20 jobs and growing. There are also some leasable square footage in there that they'll be using to rent out to other small businesses looking to locate and grow here. The Wells Fargo site preparation, I think, was a big success, and there's an amazing vision there for using that property. We've had great CTP grant. Again, that's the Collaborative Tourism Promotion Grant Program. Those have been awarded for cool events like the Albany Scottish Festival and Highland Games, website and other marketing materials for the AVA and ADA, sports tournaments and other events. Lots of things at the Expo Center, like the Quilt Show, the Northwest Fly Fishing Expo that just happened. Those things have brought in hundreds and hundreds of overnight stays and highlighted what Albany has to offer. And one thing that you might all know about the Albany Downtown Block Party, they've completed a couple successful years now, and that was a benefactor of that CTP grant as well. So there's a lot of projects that are underway and that we have to look forward to in the future as well. Just rattle off a few. The waterfront project, of course, we're all excited for that. Grand opening on 4th of July. This MUPD, multi-unit property tax exemption program I mentioned, another good one to look forward to that will hopefully spur a lot of much needed housing development and neighborhood development in Albany. We've got the potential for the OB development downtown and a hotel, which would be really exciting. The St. Francis and Old City Hall projects. What I'm categorizing as a good problem to have, which is a downtown parking situation that we're actively working on, and you'll be hearing about lately or in the coming future. You heard a presentation from Scott Letman in the last month or so, and there's been some ongoing concerns about, just doing business in Albany and public safety and those types of things. So working with our partners at the Chamber and the Downtown Association and our police department on putting together resources for businesses, some learning opportunities. So that's coming down the pipeline as well. I mentioned the short-term rental regulations in Albany. You might remember this was several years ago now, updating our code to provide for the collection of TLT funds from those short-term rentals. That's something that we knew at the time. We didn't have a plan in place for actually implementing that code change, but that was a first step. So we're actively working on that implementation part. We had hoped that there was a path forward with the state's program for collecting TLT. It looks like that's not going to be a viable option. So we're working on another avenue of contracting, probably with a third party, to help manage the regulation of short-term rentals in Albany and the collection of transient lodging tax. So they're paying their fair share into that TLT bucket. We've got a few exciting recruitments, actually with hundreds of jobs attached to them, as well as using vacant and underutilized property here. We've talked about future TIF districts in East and South Albany. We're in the middle of our feasibility study surrounding those with grant funds from the state. So that's an update that you'll be getting coming up. We're looking forward to engaging with the Economic Development Advisory Committee that you remember was set up, and we've met once and looking forward to meeting again. And then there's always ongoing work with creating, updates to our website and other marketing materials that are really useful when we're talking about recruiting and getting information out to our existing businesses. All right, that was a lot. That was an overview. Appreciate you listening to us, and if you have any questions.
So I'll start with Councilor Hopkins.
Just an incredibly minor typo on that last slide that you just showed.
Don't go back. No, just kidding.
Go ahead, I can point it out to you on the slide. That one, down on the bottom left photo of the top left picture. No, that. No,
Yep,
right there. Okay. How do you spell J.C. Penney?
Yeah.
Oh.
James Cash Penny.
We'll get that fixed, thank you.
Thank you. I corrected the developer on that because they put that spelling up on the front of the building.
Oh.
And they had to completely change their sign when I noticed that. So anyway, that's it. Good job.
The other councilors have any questions or concerns or comments?
I had one quick thing. You briefly mentioned the business directory. Can you elaborate more on this, like goals for that or?
Sure. It's a topic that you might remember. Gosh, I'm trying to remember now when it was that we last talked about that. A business registration is a tool used in many communities to gather information about who's doing business in their city and the types of risks that might be involved with the operations at that location. that's a conversation, if you'd like, I could bring back. It's not something that we're actively pursuing at this moment, but it's a conversation that we could have in the future if you'd like.
Yeah, I believe that we discussed this spring of last year, and I think that I might have to go back, but maybe I'm just misremembering. I would like to explore that as a discussion piece for a future meeting. So if we could plan on that, like get something drafted up or get something planned out, I think it'd be great to discuss that to better serve our community and businesses.
Okay.
We've discussed this since 2019, off and on since 2019.
Time flies.
And before, yes, before I was even on council. So any other council? Councilor McGee, you have anything? Councilor McGee?
I do not. Thank you for the overview.
Okay. Any other councilor have a comment?
I just have a. Say that was an excellent presentation, and I thank you for it. Pardon me for cutting you off. I didn't realize you.
She said what you said.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So, and Sophie, I would like, and Jennifer, I'd like you to know that that was a great presentation. It's actually kind of the first time I've been on council that we had something like this. So it's long overdue, so great job. And I'm sure we'll have questions over coffee and we can talk about things. I am interested in the STR, the short-term rental. I did receive a message from a constituent, and I'll forward it to you and copy Peter on it, about the short-term rentals. And I'm hoping that we'll figure out something that those folks can pay their fair share, because they've actually asked me about how do we get this so we can pay our fair share.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a good thing to have that extra revenue coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a equitable thing to do for our hotels and motels that have been paying into it historically. And same, I've had folks reach out to me too that are saying, I'm thinking about doing this, or I am doing this in Albany. Is there something that I need to be paying? So yeah, we'll bring you information on that when we have it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Next on tonight's agenda is Transportation Advisory Commission, recommendation, potential rectangular rapid flashing beacon locations. Ron Irish, page 15 through 17 in your packet.
RRFBs for short. I didn't name them.
Okay.
Earlier this evening, you heard from Wanda Sheeler. She had a request in some time ago for a crosswalk and a pedestrian crossing improvement with RRFBs on Knox Butte Road at Expo Parkway. And last November, you were discussing that request, and staff suggested that you refer it to the Transportation Advisory Commission. We did that because back in 2017, the council had asked the Traffic Safety Commission to come up with a prioritized list of locations for RFBs. And that original 2017 list had, I think, 17 locations on it, 10 of which had been built, 7 of which hadn't. The location at Knox Butte and Expo Parkway wasn't on that list. And so staff suggested that you refer it to the Transportation Advisory Commission, that they update the list, take a look at the Knox Butte Expo Parkway location, and then forward back to you some version of a prioritized list. So going back to that 2017 list and the 10 that were built, back in 2017 and since then to today, council hasn't directed any money at the installation of pedestrian crossing improvements. And so the crossing improvements that have occurred have essentially been targets of opportunity. So if we were doing a street project on a corridor and one of those crossings happened to be on it, we incorporated it into the street project. When grant funding opportunities came up, we looked at that list and we applied we got some of them built through grant applications. In a few cases, a development project occurred next to a potential crossing improvement. We were able to condition the development to do it. So those were targets of opportunities at how they went in. There was no funding to build them. Our RFB installations generally run somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 a piece. They're not inexpensive. The cost varies depending on the installation. So if you think about a 2-lane road with no median island, there's a device on either side of the road. If it's a multi-lane road with a median island, there's an extra device in the middle. Anything that we put in that involves these RFPs or pedestrian crossing, a crosswalk, has to meet current ADA standards. Very often you have to upgrade the curb returns on either side. Sometimes that leads to storm drainage improvements, and so the cost varies. So the The Transportation Advisory Commission met on 2 occasions and discussed potential locations. They also, some of the members took a field trip. We drove around town and looked at them all. The results of those meetings and those discussions are shown on the map that was attached to your packet. And that map includes locations of all of the existing locations, plus 17 new suggested locations. The 17 suggested locations that are new are split into what the commission described as priority locations, and then just basically tier 2, everything else. All of them they thought were important, but for one reason or another, they thought that the ones they identified as priority locations maybe had a little bit more urgency to them. The priority locations tended to be on the arterial collector street system, often busier, higher speed roads, generally at locations where there had been an identified heavy pedestrian movement. So sometimes near schools, near parks. So that was, I think, how they kind of selected out the priority locations versus the rest. But once again, no funding at any of them. And so, you know, the question before you and the reason this whole report came back once again was triggered by the request from Wanda Sheeler about Knox Beach Road, Expo Parkway. So you're still kind of stuck with like, what do you do? And we have, I think, 3 suggestions for how you might approach that decision. One of them would be to continue looking at them as just targets of opportunity, basically the way we've done it in the past. And so as road projects come up, we'll do them. But we haven't had a particular project where council has pointed at us and said, go do that one. So targets of opportunity, one approach. Second approach, most of you are aware, we're about to start an update of our transportation system plan. That we'll be starting that very shortly. It's probably going to take a year and a half, 2 years to complete. Based on the new federal requirement or the state requirements, it will be forced to emphasize and fund pedestrian improvements, bike improvements, transit improvements. And so there's a high likelihood that a lot of these locations could end up as specific locations in the TSP as identified projects eligible at that point for SDC funding, which at the moment they're not. And so that's one potential, is you could look at incorporating these into that TSP update and then assign SDC funding to them at that point. That would put them at its earliest funding 2 to 3 years out. Third possibility is you could actually look at some of these, decide that they're important enough that you want to investigate funding them early. That would mean redirecting funding from something else. So you would need to tell us which ones were important. We would need to go see and do a better scoping job of exactly what that crossing would cost, and then see what funding opportunities might be available, whether or not we'd have to shift money from an already programmed street project or delay it, or if there's enough to do it, who knows? But we would need to know which crossings you thought you wanted to treat that way. And so with that, I'll stop. I know you've been here quite a while.
So we have questions for Councilor Kopczynski?
Tangentially, off the top of your head, do you know if this Knox Butte intersection concern is already being addressed in the North Albany plan?
It's
Albany plan?
East Albany.
East Albany, yeah, pardon me.
It's not specifically addressed in the East Albany plan, but the location is identified in our transportation system plan as a spot for a future traffic signal, where Expo Parkway would continue north, and Expo Parkway is the road where our TSP transportation plan envisions Century Drive eventually being reconnected to. So eventually there'll be a signal there that would accommodate all of the pedestrian crossing movements that an RFP would now. The dilemma is that signal is quite some ways off, and we don't know how far. And so, you know, do we want to wait 10, 15 years to do it is the dilemma there. But there is a plan.
Thank you.
Councilor Smith?
I was going to ask about Knox Butte as well, but I'll hold off for now. If I may, I would like to ask for the Waverly Del Rio crossing to be considered as something to do sooner rather than later, because Deerfield Park is being redeveloped, and that is a heavy pedestrian crossing in an awkward spot between two fast break corners where the speed limit was just reduced. So it seems like a natural extension, in my mind, I'm only one person, but it seems like a natural extension of that overall traffic change and usage change at the park.
That location is on the map.
I see that.
It's one of those 5 that were identified as a priority.
I see
So
that,
it's
yeah.
how we, I don't believe that the improvements that the Parks Department is envisioning for that park at the moment include this PED crossing, so we need
I
to
doubt
find
it.
another way.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank
right
you.
there.
I'll go ahead and address Knox Butte. That's a hard one. I think we talked some time ago about maybe doing a flashing beacon there as a temporary investment of a lot of money until the road is rebuilt. But that's, as you said, that rebuilding of that road is gonna a long ways out, and nobody knows how long is. And it's sort of on urban standards on the south side of the street, and it's a country road on the north side of the street. And it's a tough problem to solve. And I'm not sure that a flashing beacon would be the right thing to do. Full-on redevelopment of the street seems like the right thing to do, but that's not in anybody's wallet.
Well, I've cleaned up roads there when giving a hoot started, and
Doing it again on
you-
Saturday.
You got to keep your head on the swivel because them cars come in that corner and they're just flying. So it's very dangerous there. Councilor Montague, are you done, Councilor Smith?
Yes.
Councilor Montague?
First off, I want to thank Counselor Smith for stalling long enough so I could come up with 3 more questions, so appreciate that. First, was this list, once you added or changed the list from safety, did you guys take it back to safety? Or is that your intention to go back and have that conversation so that we have it kind of 2 lenses, right? From the lens of transportation and also safety?
The Traffic Safety Commission was essentially abandoned here a couple of years ago, and it morphed into the Transportation Advisory Commission. So they're essentially the same body now.
Okay, thank you for that history lesson. Are the ones on the potential targets on the arterial and collectors more likely to get funding if we keep them as targets of opportunity?
Because most of our street rehab money is spent on the arterial collector system, the more likely to be a project that the city does. For instance, the recent project that was completed last year on Queen Avenue from Broadway to Pacific, there were 2 RFPs installed with that project, both on that earlier list. And so when we looked at the design of Queen Avenue, there wasn't any doubt in our mind that those 2 were going to go in. If they hadn't been on the list, we'd have had to think of it, right? Or it might not have been as clear. So it's more likely that they'll be funded because they'll be
Part of a larger project.
part of a larger project. It's also, if they're on the arterial collector street system, very often easier to meet some of the grant criteria. Safe routes to school grants, for instance, prioritize locations on busy multi-lane streets. And
Yeah, that's
so
what I was thinking.
The South Albany one.
They're more likely to get funding.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, the one at South Albany would be something to be, because there's been accidents over there. There's been people, we slowed it down on, was that Queen or Waverly, that right there? 34th. Yeah.
And then is there an opportunity to coordinate with our accessibility plan that we just came up with? I know that there were several intersections that we identified that need ADA upgrades. What I heard you say was a lot of the times these need an ADA upgrade before you can do the crossing. Is there some coordination that can happen with that plan?
There's probably coordination that would flow from these locations toward that ADA plan. I don't know that the ADA plan would drive these.
Okay.
So the ADA plan looked at curb returns that didn't meet city standards, and it really didn't look at whether or not there were pedestrian crosswalks, for instance. It just looked at, does the curb return meet the city standard or not? And if not, how far out is it? But I think this plan or these locations would likely drive some ADA improvements to make them work, but I don't think the other plan would drive these.
And then last question for now. Are you able to relocate the RRFBs? Like,
What do you
if we were to put in the RRFB on Knox Butte and then we got the signal, is it even feasible to move, like,
Very often
Move
you
them?
can.
Can we use them?
The ones we've been using tend to be solar powered. You'll see a little panel up on top. They're interconnected across the street with kind of a radio system, so they're wireless, no cables. They're bolted into the ground with a pretty deep footing. And so if you have a location you're going to change, it is possible to unbolt the posts and the entire assembly and move it over and put it on a new footing. And that did in fact happen in a couple of occasions. I know there used to be RFBs in North Albany at Gibson Hill and Crocker. And we put a signal in there, we didn't need the RFBs anymore, and those RFBs we essentially gave to Benton County, who relocated them to Scenic and Oak Grove, I think. So the crossings that you see in Scenic and Oak Grove that are now the counties they came from us because those were, city residents, students walking across Scenic to get to the school at Oak Grove, so it made some sense. So you can reuse some of the components.
Any other councilors have a comment or question?
Just,
Please.
it's sort of a question. Did I hear Ms. Sheeler correctly that she's been requesting this since 2017, or 2007? It seemed like,
It was a long time.
that's 27 years. So I just want to make sure if I heard that correctly.
She has been interested in traffic issues out there and the need for a signal improvement since prior to 2010 when we adopted our TSP. I know she raised issues then. Those concerns were one of the reasons that TSP included a temporary signal, for instance, at Century Drive in Knox Butte that ODOT declined to let us put in. It's one of the reasons that it showed a signal at Knox Butte and Expo Parkway, are those concerns. Her requests for our RFBs don't date back that far because we weren't putting any in back in 2010.
She's been asking for help out in that area though, since
She's
that
been
time.
asking for help out there for quite some time. The RRFB request is more recent. But the basic concern has been there for a long time.
Thank you.
Councilor Newton or Councilor McGee?
No, I don't have anything. Thank you.
Councilor Kopczynski? Thank you very much, council. Next on tonight's agenda is business from the council. I'll start with Councilor McGee.
Yes, I had a constituent reach out to me, and she also reached out to Councilor Smith in reference to a situation that happened to her at Albany General Hospital, and was interested in knowing if we had ordinances regarding protesting, and I told her we didn't, just long as she is on a public sidewalk and not preventing anyone from entering or exiting. She was free to protest all she felt. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Councilor Smith, move my ward.
I'll pass.
Okay. Councilor Kopczynski? Councilor Montague?
Yeah, I do have something. It sounded like earlier that there was an agreement with the Sybaris folks to let them have 10 minutes to speak, and it sounded like that agreement was changed without letting them know that that agreement had changed. And I just want to say that I'm really disappointed in the city in not holding up that agreement, and would ask that they have the opportunity to come back and speak to us in the time that we had agreed on originally. I understand that they gave us quite a bit of information, but if there was anything that they would like to bring back, I think they should have that opportunity, since that's what we agreed to.
So actually, Councilor Montague, I gave them 10 minutes
This is my
last.
time.
Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
And then I would like to ask, what kind of support do we see for our historical downtown? I understand that CARA is ending, but we need to have a plan and figure out a long-term program to develop and keep our historic buildings downtown in good working order. So we need to figure out something and work, as we indicated, as a good partner and steward of the city with folks who need help. I, as a person who deals with process improvement every single day, I do believe we need a process for that. I don't think that we should, just give money to people we like. I think that there needs to be a process, it needs to be equitable, but we do need to have a program and a plan. We need to figure out how we do that going forward. And then the second thing I had was I had a constituent reach out, and I'm not sure if everybody got this email, but reached out with concerns about a recent change we made to AMC Title VII, where it states that the proposed, and this was about special events, we just made that change. And the concern was there was a blurb in there, and we talked about it, and I want to give Councilor Newton credit. She did bring up that concern, and at the time, I didn't understand really what her concern was, but after getting this email, I understood, and also sharing that concern. So I just, for a procedural question, I'm wondering how I go about, because this is an ordinance, how would I go about suggesting or moving or asking for a change to that language in AMC Title VII? Would that just be a move, or do we need to bring that as, because it's an ordinance and you have to read ordinances twice? I'm not sure about the procedure.
Right. Well, you'd have to air what that is. I think that you're referring, well, I don't want to presume that I know what you're referring to.
Oh, I can read it. It's, there's just a little sentence in there that says, the proposed activity or use, oh no, don't go away. The proposed activity or use does not include elements that are unlawful in federal court. And the concern was, we already can't do things that are illegal in federal court. So there's really no reason to have this. There is potential for future discrimination against education about things that might be illegal federally, that maybe we want to talk about them not being illegal federally, or, having our rights to free speech infringed because of this blurb, and that is my concern.
Okay, let me look into what that ordinance is and get back to you.
Yeah, and just what is the procedure for moving that be struck from that ordinance? Thank you.
Councilor Novak?
Thank you. I do have two things, one of which Councilor Montague just referenced. I believe this is the letter from Mr. Winchewski, and if I mispronounced that, my apologies. I need some clarification because I don't really understand how educational meetings are being hindered by changes to the Parks and Rec permitting language. I don't understand, so I would appreciate if anyone on staff can help me with that, or on the council. That was what he was asserting in his letter, and as I say, I need clarification because I do not understand. So that was the first thing. The second thing, I am really thankful that the Economic Development team gave their presentation tonight, because I think with the information that we received from the Bennetts and the things that were underscored that my ears heard, one thing that our economic development is about is business retention and expansion. It's about placemaking and tourism. I'm quoting from notes that I wrote. One thing that Mrs. Adams also said was, it's important our keeping our web of business supports strong so no one falls through the cracks. And then at the end of the airport presentation, when we were giving our comments, our mayor said that in regard to the airport, it's a resource that's been languishing. And I immediately thought of one of the letters that was in our packet in the proposal from the Bennetts, which reminded me that at one time, this Oregon Electric Railway, not that long ago actually, was vermin infested, which I find unbelievably disgusting, and totally inhabitable. I I am loath at the thought of the city not doing what we can to help this business, which for every reason that they've spelled out in their proposal, I support with everything in me. I don't know what happens if they don't get that gap funding, but I will tell you, I think we need to find it. The council and the city staff together, we need to work together and find a way to help them, because one of the last things I want to see is that building become what it was before the Bennetts stepped up and invested that $900,000 in it, and then that was followed just 2 years ago with the $200,000 grant. The state is invested in this as well, and it is a point of pride for our town. And I just think we have to find a way. We have to find a way. The council has discretion that I don't often see exercised in regard to small businesses. You know, I appreciated the review that CoreQuest was given $9 million funding, and they created some jobs, and that's wonderful. $9 million is so much bigger than $545,000.
That, we did not give them $9 million.
Okay.
I don't know where that figure came from.
Okay,
but that's
maybe I
certainly not from the
misheard.
city.
Okay, I'm really glad that's not the case, because I'm like, this is a piddly little amount of money here that we can find a way to, I just see a lot of times, you know, it's the enterprise zones and these big businesses don't pay taxes for 10 years, where the Bennett business is currently paying taxes and would immediately be on our tax rolls. How is that not a boon? How is that not a help to our town? Not to mention keeping everything that they have going there in the restoration of a historic building that is, this is the only electric station left in the state. There are so many reasons to be all over this and to support it with everything in us and to find a way. They even said in that report that it's like the equivalent of 4 bond payments, 4 months of bond payments. It doesn't shove off the sunsetting of the Cara thing, so you can do another one in South Albany. South Albany. It doesn't hinder it by much, a few months. And what we stand to gain versus what we stand to lose by not finding a way to help them close this gap, to me, it's just, I really, really want us to consider this, both the council and the city staff. We need to find a way. It's not that big of an ask. They've already proven themselves for 20-some years here, how they support the community, how they bring in business from all over. I know my restaurant did. And as far as that goes, you know, restaurants, I don't know if you noticed when we were getting the presentation from Director Bailey, but restaurants pay a huge water bill every month. It's a wonder to me sometimes how a restaurant even stays in business. And as a restaurant who's no longer in business, let me just say, I covet the good restaurants in this town. Nothing against chains. Actually, I have a lot against chains. Independent, family-owned, you can't compare. Go to Denny's, go ahead. Go to any chain. Go to the upscale chain, Carino's. And no offense to any manager or employee of a chain restaurant who might be listening, but can I just say to you that people take pride in what they do in this town, the small businesses that are putting their heart on a plate and just praying someone will come in or that they'll have a way to stay alive. So I'm putting it out to you with everything in me. Let us please find a way. And I am also likewise, forgive me, but I'm disappointed. I expected 10 minutes. I was really surprised. I don't think 10 minutes is that long. And I do think if you change it in the future, I would sincerely hope that you notify council, because I was completely caught off guard by that, as were they, and it's not right. I don't think. Thank you. I think I'm done.
Councilor Newton?
Hey, I have wanted to bring up a question that a constituent had. They were wondering if we could provide, and I'm actually also very curious about this, a more realistic dollar amount for the new traffic cameras. She, spoke to me and said that she kept reading $3 million annually minus costs, and she was wondering if we had the pay grade increase, any increase in benefit costs, addition to with the new clerk, and the amount being paid to Vera Mobility for purchase, installation, programming, legal fees for contract review, et cetera, all that. How much are we actually going to be taking the take home from that, 3 million guesstimate. I wanted to know just like maybe what those numbers were more based on more solidly. And then my other question was also kind of more procedural. I was looking, and this maybe jumping the gun, I was looking at the meeting minutes for, from our last meetings. And I also have a question about, we had people from that submitted letters as well. So we had people submit letters last meeting, and also we had that packet from the Bennett's. Are those included in our meeting minutes? That was just my question. Because I didn't see any letters regarding a few things, and I remember also with a few. So just want to know what constitutes things being included when they're emailed in advance to be included in the meeting minutes.
Gabe?
Councilor Newton, hello. It depends. If something was emailed to the council, that often doesn't make it to the clerk, especially if it was emailed to individual councilors, if it's testimony, something like that. If they go through our website and use our use our website to sign up for comment, give us a document, that does get filed with the record. The way that the city of Albany records documents for the record is we note them in the minutes, the little asterisk, and at the bottom of the minute, see that if you want a copy of that, you can contact the clerks. We file that away with our with the copy of the agenda. So, for instance, what was handed out this evening at the dais, that will be included. That'll be held away, scanned and stored in our database. And in the future, who wants it can ask for it, and we can provide that. Items that were emailed to councilors, just even if it's just a PDF, if it doesn't include the city clerk, it goes to you unless you specifically send it to us and ask us to put it on record, in which case, of course, we do that.
Okay, that's really good to know. So I'll probably forward things over, just because I know we've referenced specifically the Bennett's, but I know we also referenced letters like the last council meeting. Someone said, "Oh, you read my letter, and it's okay." And I was like, "Oh no, but for transparency's sake, please say what you sent to us in your letter, and not just leave." So just think it's good for context.
Thank you. So to clear up a comment we made earlier today, I gave them 10 minutes at the last meeting we had, the last city council meeting. Matt opted to do 3 minutes. I did not promise him 10 minutes in this meeting. Did not. There's nowhere in writing I said that. So business from the public is 3 minutes. If we go further with this, then there'll be a different discussion. With that, I'll go business from the council, from the city manager.
Have a chance?
Yeah, everybody went. I started by ward.
All right, so that is on me then, because I gave Mr. Bennett the impression that he would have 10 minutes, but that was before the first meeting. And then he took about a minute and a half. Then we talked about it again, and I said I would bring it up to the mayor. But we have to understand that it's the mayor's, the 3-minute limit is a self-imposed limit. And it's the mayor's discretion to provide extra time or to keep it at the 3 minutes. I probably misled Matt, and I apologize for that. I wanted to say that before I moved to Albany, I heard about Sybaris. And I heard people rave about Sybaris, and it is definitely a source of pride for the city. And not only is Sybaris a source of pride, but Matt and Janelle are pillars of the community. And then although we have no program for grants to small businesses at this point, staff have been helping Sybaris for years to either obtain grants or to arrange financing. And a lot of work has gone into this, and I acknowledge that. It looks like an absolutely wonderful project. On Wednesday, we can hear from the city attorney, who is away this evening, about the significant legal implications of gifting public funds to an individual or a business without an established program. We can also, at that point, if the council desires, and the council's decision is at that time to look into a program, as you had mentioned, Councilor Montague, we can talk about the ramifications of creating such a program. Okay. There was a question about the low-income assistance program.
Yes.
And that threshold went from 60% to 70% of adjusted gross income. And there's lots of information on that on our website, if anybody's interested in that. And we are pretty active about trying to encourage people who need that assistance to take advantage of it. But we can certainly reinvigorate that effort. I wanted to point out to the council that we have a tentative joint executive session with the Millersburg City Council on April 22nd. And that's to discuss the CH2M case, okay? However, that pends the confirmation from Millersburg that their council can do that. At this point, there's nothing else on the council agenda for that evening, so if that doesn't come through, we'll be able to cancel the April 22nd meeting as well, okay? And that's all I have, pending your questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Peter. Let me get back to the agenda for tonight's meeting. Tree City, nope, up here. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting. Next meeting is going to be Wednesday night at 6 p.m. for a regular city council meeting. I'll see you all then. Thank you.